Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Before we get started, let's first get a glimpse of today's highlights. Korea's exports fall for an 18th straight month in June, but they declined by the slowest pace in a year, while imports still shrank at a faster rate. It's been a week since Britain has decided to leave the European Union, and today we take a look at the political landscape in the UK and markets after the vote. Korea's exports have been falling for a year and a half now, but the good news is that we might be seeing light at the end of the tunnel as the pace of decline in June slowed to its lowest level in a year. Ari Kim-min-ji has the details.
Korea's exports may be getting back on the track to recovery. The Trade Ministry says outbound shipments fell 2.7% from a year ago to $45.3 billion last month. It marks the 18th straight month on the slide, but the rate of decline slowed significantly.
Despite a decline in the number of workdays, the pace of decline was the slowest in a year. The average daily export value in June was also the highest in September of last year.
On top of that, exports denominated in the Korean won rose 2.4%, posting gains for a second straight month. The ministry attributed the better performance to a rise in exports of computers and high-value-added chips, as well as a slowing contraction in outbound shipments of major export items such as semiconductors and steel. Imports tumbled 8% during the same period to almost $33.7 billion, also falling for the 18th straight month. With that, the trade surplus in June came to over $11.6 billion, extending the surplus streak to 53 months. While the ministry forecasts exports to maintain the recovery momentum, experts say that doesn't necessarily mean an improvement in overall conditions.
Figures have been getting better since the start of the year, but they're still in the negative range. Because exports fell so much last year, it's hard to say they're doing well. Also in June, if you take out exports of vessels, which can be seen as a temporary factor, it's not much of a difference from the previous month.
In the latter half of the year, analysts say there are both favorable and unfavorable conditions looming. For one, oil prices are expected to gradually pick up, and the global economy is forecast to show signs of modest recovery. But Korea's heavy dependence on China could add more downward pressure as Beijing pushes ahead with major restructuring, and Brexit could also weigh down on the global economy. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Meanwhile, Korea's consumer prices rose 0.8% last month compared to a year ago, marking the same pace of growth seen in May. Statistics Korea says weak global oil prices and a drop in agricultural, fisheries, and livestock products all played a part in the sluggish gain. In fact, oil prices dropped nearly 10% last month from the previous year. Consumer price growth overall has fallen short of the central bank's inflation target of 2% for the entire first half of the year. The Bank of Korea has approved a loan worth around $8.7 billion to help facilitate the government's corporate restructuring drive, marking the official launch of a recapitalization fund announced early last month. The fund will expand the capital base of state-run banks, Korea Development Bank and Korea Exim Bank, that have high debt exposure to struggling local shipbuilders. The loan will be dispersed through the Industrial Bank of Korea, which will use the capital to buy cocoa bonds issued by the state banks. Now, cocoa bonds or contingent convertibles are, simply put, the riskiest debt issued by banks, which are automatically converted to equity under set conditions. The funds will be provided upon the request of the state banks until the end of next year, but the BOK added that there is the possibility of extended assistance. For a growing number of Koreans, homes are becoming much more than just a place to live. They're considered spaces to express their individuality and put their creativity to work. And our Lee Ju-young tells us how this has led to a boom in Korea's home furnishing market.
Homemaker Kim Bo-mi recently moved into a new home, and she set out the ambitious goal of transforming her apartment with her husband.
We are going to be living here for a long time, so I wanted to personally design it and buy the materials myself.
Like him, a growing number of people who want to fine-tune the interior setting and decorations of their dwellings has led to a boom in the home furnishing market. According to Statistics Korea, the market reached roughly $10 billion in 2014, and the figure is projected to get even higher to $15 billion in 2023. Experts say this is largely due to the high popularity of home remodeling TV shows, as well as the rising number of single and two-person households, which now account for nearly half of all homes as of 2015. As a result, Korea's biggest furniture retailer Hansem posted $1.4 billion in sales last year, a significant jump from the $608 million back in 2011. The local opening of Swedish furniture giant IKEA, with its leaner prices and do-it-yourself products, has also stirred up competition, creating strong demand in the home decoration sector. Within a year since its arrival in December 2014, almost 7 million people have visited its first store, pushing sales up to the tune of $260 million. And with IKEA planning to invest about $1 billion to build 5 more stores in Korea by 2020, experts say local furniture companies need to step up their game and expand distribution channels if they want to hold on to their market dominance. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
It has been exactly 1 week since the results of the UK's EU referendum shocked the world. And our Eunice Kim joins us in the studio today to tell us more about this. Hi, Eunice.
Hello.
So there has been quite a lot of developments ever since the EU referendum, or the British referendum, and still we seem to have more questions than answers.
You're absolutely right. For instance, who's in charge? Who will be in charge? Will the UK be able to keep its passporting rights or the trade agreements with the EU? Leaders on all sides have been scrambling to figure out the next steps of these uncharted waters. And as a power vacuum rings loud in Westminster, ironically, it's a foreigner who's offering some semblance of leadership Britain sorely needs, the Canadian economist and Bank of England Governor Mark Carney.
Today, it has to be said that the economy is more complex and and our forecasting models are a little less reliable.
A rare chuckle, capping off a busy week that still leaves the UK directionless. In the days following the Brexit vote that had nearly 52% of Britain's vote in favor of leaving the European Union, there was little sign of a plan from the Leave campaign. And a shocker from the man widely considered a favorite to fill the shoes of outgoing Prime Minister David Cameron.
That having consulted colleagues and in view of the circumstances in Parliament, I have concluded that person cannot be me.
With the well-liked former London mayor out of the race for the prime ministership, attention shifts to his former Leave ally Justice Secretary Michael Gove and Interior Minister Theresa May, who campaigned on the side of Remain. She has ruled out another referendum or a snap election before 2020.
Brexit means Brexit. There must be no attempts to remain inside the EU, no attempts to rejoin it through the back door, and no second referendum.
Once the UK's leader is decided by September, the most glaring question will be, will the UK be able to keep its trade relations with the EU at status quo? Brussels this week, while expressing sadness, stood by their imperative that free access to the 500 million strong market will only come by honoring the EU's 4 freedoms.
Leaders made it crystal clear today that access to the single market requires acceptance of all 4 freedoms, including the freedom of movement. There will be no single market à la carte.
Midweek, markets showed signs of recovery, the FTSE 500 regaining its earlier deep losses. But investors and world leaders are not blind to the great uncertainty that lies ahead.
All this uncertainty has contributed to a form of economic post-traumatic stress disorder amongst households and businesses and in financial markets. It now seems plausible that uncertainty could remain elevated for some time, with a greater drag on activity than we had previously projected. And moreover, its effect.
And of course, that great uncertainty is something that the whole world is keeping a close eye on. In fact, Korea's top financial regulator had something to say about this.
Yeah, you're right. So earlier today on this Friday, we heard from the Financial Services Commission Chairman Im Jong-yong, and he said he expects that this uncertainty to linger for some time, given the lack of precedence of any country ever trying to divorce the EU. Markets in Korea, of course, have been stabilizing this week after also being hit hard by the Brexit decision 1 week ago. The International Monetary Fund also raising a red flag on Thursday, calling the Brexit uncertainty a top risk to the global economy.
I'd say Brexit has created significant uncertainty, and we believe this is likely to dampen growth in the near term, particularly in the UK, but with repercussions also for Europe and the global economy.
And the IMF spokesman went on to urge EU leaders and other policymakers to take decisive actions. The tough negotiations with the next UK PM under current rules can take up to 2 years once the legal mechanism, Article 50, is triggered. This is not expected to begin until at least September, when the new Prime Minister is named June.
Wow, that's quite a long time there.
We still got a few months to go to that, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in today, Eunice.
Sure thing.
And Brexit was, of course, the talk of the town at the World Economic Forum in Tianjin earlier this week. Our Kwon Jang-ho was there and got to sit down with Chief Investment Officer at UBS Simon Smiles to talk about the market outlook in a post-Brexit era.
Thank you for making the time to meet with us.
Thank you.
We're here in China, and what have Chinese people been asking you about Brexit? I mean, what are their concerns, and how does it affect Asia?
Yeah, I think it's one of surprise and a lack of understanding about what's happened. I mean, you've had over 40 years of an experiment putting Europe ever closer together. Suddenly a country votes to leave, and in the aftermath of voting to leave, 3 million plus people suggest that they made the wrong decision. With respect to the concerns about what it means for China, I think they're relatively limited though. At the end of the day, this doesn't have a huge negative impact on China. In fact, it could potentially be a positive should down the track bilateral trade deals, etc. be opened up with the United Kingdom.
But there are concerns, they say, about further disintegration of the EU and that it would badly affect China in the long run. What was your opinion on that?
Look, I think those concerns are overdone. So at least in our base case, this is the end, if you will, to referendums in Europe for the near term. I think this will actually galvanise the rest of the European Union with respect to further integration. I think it's almost certain that the European Union, or the remainder of the European Union, will act with a relatively tough stance towards its negotiations with the United Kingdom to set a precedent that leaving the European Union is not something that other countries want to do.
People with UK investments might want to move out. Would you advise that?
Well, it's interesting. With respect to financial investments, the clients I've been speaking to in the aftermath of the UK referendum are actually looking to buy. And with respect to the pound, all of the conversation I'm having is the level at which to actually buy pounds rather than continue to sell. The one area where there is more concern is what this means for property prices. And that is an area where clients are potentially looking, not necessarily to pull their money out of the UK property market, but definitely they're having pause with respect to whether to make purchases they were planning to before the referendum.
Korea was worried about, before the Brexit, the outflow of capital from Korea. Do you think we will see that? What kind of reaction do you think Asia should be wary of?
It's not great for open economies with very large trade focuses such as Korea, such as Taiwan, and their related equity markets. Fundamentally though, I don't think this changes the story for Korea. It doesn't change the story for Taiwan. Asia will continue to grow. And global growth we expect to continue at its relatively modest 2.5% to 3% pace.
There are, for example, HSBC have said they're likely to move 1,000 jobs out of Europe to Europe and Ireland. Do you think that's likely, or is that just a knee-jerk reaction? And do you see others following suit?
Look, European passporting is a key issue. However, we're not even at the stage of Article 50 being triggered, and from the point Article 50 is triggered, there's then 2 years to negotiate the relationship the UK has with the rest of the European Union. I think it's clearly too early, therefore, to talk about wholesale movement of staff from London to other locations.
Looking ahead, where does it go from here? What would financial markets like to see?
Financial markets would like to see one of two things. They'd like to see some way of the UK getting out of their leave vote. The financial markets would definitely take as a positive if there was an ability by the political establishment to ignore this referendum and keep the UK in Europe. I think the second path would be a relatively conciliatory approach by the European leadership, which moves down a path of the UK still being involved in Europe. Unfortunately, I think in the near term, we're not going to get either of those scenarios, so we will see more volatility.
Thank you again for your time and your insights, and let's hope there is still a bright future for the UK, as you said.
Thank you very much.
And that wraps it up for today and this week, but we'll be back next week with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.